The Republic of Kenya on the 9th of August 2022 went to the polls in a highly contested presidential election. One camp led by the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, and this camp being the Azimio la Umoja camp. The other camp led by the current Deputy President William Ruto, and that is the Kenya Kwanza. Well, the IEBC, which is the Electoral Commission of the Republic of Kenya, went ahead to declare within 7 days Deputy President William Ruto President-elect of the Republic of Kenya. Well, the Azimio la camp did not take this well, and we know that as of this week, Monday, the camp filed a presidential petition seeking court to nullify the election, but also seeking that the same court declares Chebukati, unfit to hold that position. Well, that will take first phase of this conversation, but also we know that as of last week, media was washed with the news coming in from Uganda Airlines and questions around the credibility of appointment of public servants in Uganda, and that will take part 2 of our conversation. But for now, let's dive straight to the chase. And the question that I will pose to you and the lawyers here and get it best is that the principle of de minimis non curiat lex, that will the Odinga camp prove that the irregularities and the offenses committed in this election actually amount to a substantial difference in the outcome? Well, that and much more on this episode of the Youth Roundtable. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this episode. I'll actually introduce to you our panelists for today right away, and in no particular order. A guest on this show, Beatrice Kamakune. She's a member of the National Youth Council of Uganda, and she's the first timer on this show. Beatrice, many thanks for joining us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
You can say hello to our viewers.
Good afternoon, viewers. I'm very excited to be on this youth discussion. I've been looking forward, so I know that the discussions here will be deep, beneficial, and probably give us a wider lens in what is happening in the region and in our country. Thank you for hosting me, Kidega.
Thank you, Kamakune. Next on the show is Mr. Garang Lester, a student of law at Nkumba University. Many thanks for joining us. He's a second timer. So those of you who follow this show religiously, this face is not new to you. Garang, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Garang, like you said, Garang Quote Lester. I study the law at Nkumba University, and being second time, I am always honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, many thanks for joining us. Yes, another guest on the show, Shivan komuhangi, the student leader at Makerere University, and the first time on the Youth Roundtable. How do you feel being on the Youth Roundtable?
It's a privilege to be here. Like he said, my name is Shivan komuhangi. I'm a student leader at Makerere University. I'm privileged enough to be part of the Youth Roundtable, and I look forward to discuss and also know more from my colleagues.
Wow, thank you. Yes, the usual suspect on the Youth Roundtable, Mr. Lawel Muhwezi, a member of the Now Generation Uganda, but also a student of law at Makerere University. Lawel, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here. I am actually honored to be seated next to Shivan. She's a very powerful lady out there. I look forward to a very fruitful discussion.
All right, thank you. I hope that is not purposefully to bias my panelist. But anyway, we shall begin right away. And Lester, let me just start with you for obvious reasons. You are a law student, so at least you understand areas around presidential petitions, but also the areas around offenses committed contrary to the law. We know that the Azimio la Umoja camp on Monday filed a presidential election petition seeking that court declares the election null and void, but also that the personality of Chebukati is unfit to hold the position of chairperson of IEBC. What do you make of that move by the Azimio la Umoja camp?
Okay, thank you. So I think one thing is important to underscore in the events that are happening in the neighborhood. The fact that at the time when the entire region was anticipating some form of violence, there was a very responsible decision to go to court, and especially when it happens in a country that has history of election or post-election violence. For me, that's a step towards something that we should appreciate. Then on the petition, you see, legally speaking, they have a case, and if they can prove what they allege in their petition, then there will be no reason for the court not to do that.
Just maybe for the
And
benefit
then-
of our viewers, those who haven't had the chance to read this petition, what exactly is being alleged?
Okay, so one of the first thing, what he opened with was the personality of the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. They claimed that the chairperson was not fit, and because of how he handled them. And I think this event started from before the announcement of the results, when there was a division among the 7 commissioners, when 4 of them decided to disagree with the chairperson and the other 3, and they decided that whatever the outcomes would be, they honestly don't agree with them. Then to follow up with that is what transpired through the counting. And I think it is important to draw a line between where the problem starts. The problem, according to their petition, is that the counting was not as transparent as it should have been. So this is not about what happened through the election, through polling or through voting or whatever, or maybe normally ballot stuffing and so many of those thoughts. But this was about counting, and this is about transparency. And the allegations are there was about 25 is it polling stations or counties whose votes were not counted. I think 27 whose votes were not counted, and they believe if those votes were counted, perhaps there would be a difference. So if they can prove that those votes were not counted, and then they will have a credible ground to argue that even if the difference does not turn out in their favor, that difference was important to be part of the counting. So that for me stands out in the petition. And if they can prove that the 27 polling stations, I want to be sure that polling stations or counties, whatever they are, that the counting did not happen about the 27. So if it actually did not happen, among other things, that alone is sufficient to show that the process maybe needed to be revisited. And you never know, the court might decide in the favor of the things they're asking. Quashing the outcomes and maybe ordering for a fresh election or whatever they want the court to do.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's a very good background. Shivan Komuhangi, let me come to you straight away. I'm a scholar of Dambisa Moyo. Dambisa Moyo is an economist trained by Oxford University. In a very interesting book of hers, she says that African states are not ready for a multi-party dispensation, but what we need is a benevolent leader. But I think Kenya is proving us otherwise, because they've managed to scale up the aspect of electoral democracy. You look at the way the campaigns were run, the election day itself, the post-election, all this, I think, represents a modern day African growing democracy state. So do you think that African states are actually moving towards democratization, like real democratization, and not just, prima facie on the face of things, but real democratization, using Kenya's election as a case scenario?
Well, with the elections that happened of recent in Kenya literally, like you said, it has proved that it is a very democratic state. But like you said earlier on, it's Africa itself, the countries are still lagging behind. We can look at Kenya, us who were outside, we saw that democracy was really being championed, because having an election and people are going to vote, we literally saw this person that came through with a towel and was going to vote. In Uganda, that cannot happen. How do you even appear with a towel and you're going to vote? But that was all, it was showing how democratic that country is. But looking at other countries, it's a challenge that they have put to us. The leaders should learn from it. We can't have an election where people are being threatened, where people are being told that if you do not vote for this, a state is being militarized. We've literally seen what happens in this country all the time we are going for elections. People are militarized, people are kidnapped, people are being threatened that if you do not vote for this one, up to even the sub-county level, you can imagine. But Kenya really challenged us. The Kenyan election, I was so interested, I kept on following, and I was so moved. Even when Ruto and the Azamio camp were in a competition, it created a very, very healthy competition. That the malice and sabotage was even not that much that it would threaten other people, like in Uganda here. We literally saw what happened when Bobi Wine was stopped, the massacres that happened in November last year. But people were okay. The different camps, tell your people to vote for you, let me also tell my people to vote for me. Even the state fundraiser candidate, Odinga, it was nothing. And I keep on telling myself, if different African states can learn from this, that if we are to carry out an election, maybe that can help us tackle democracy. The parties that are, the different parties that exist in different countries can look at that, and we can have a healthy competitive election process. That even when different leaders come through to stand, they know it's people that have voted for me, and if they have not voted for me, it's okay, let me go and rest. But you find we are having opposition, and even opposition is not there to champion the causes of the oppressed, but to actually show people that they can also rule. And now that's where we have people fighting for power, people not ruling us the way we should be ruled. So Kenya literally portrayed a very, very good example, and I must applaud it. The massacre, we didn't even hear, I don't think it's only that time when they were trying to burn tires in Kisumu, like he said, that we came to see that there was a bit of violence. But literally, since these people declared they are running and they went into the election season, there was nothing like killing, this one being kidnapped, this camp being threatened, being seized from not appearing in some places. So literally,
Okay.
we should learn from Kenya.
Okay, fair enough. They've raised the bar very high, right? Comrade Lawel, let me come to you. And before we even discuss the petition and the aftermath of the election, Lawel, many people have argued that the personality of William Ruto and the campaign which the Kenya Kwanza team ran was actually one that could have deserved them or earned them the victory, and that the Azimio La Umoja camp is only crying foul. Because for the first time, Kenya's election was about the issues. One camp was saying, let us revive the economy from a bottom-up approach. The other camp was promising to give every single household that is below the poverty line 6,000 Kenya shillings per month. So the election was not about, I am a Kikuyu, I am a Luo, I am a Kalenjin, but rather about issues. So do you think that the Kenya Kwanza team has actually caused a paradigm shift in Kenya's political tragedy? Trajectory rather.
Biased question.
And that because they've changed that paradigm, they actually deserve to win, and that Kenyans resonated with their message that the economy should stand tall beyond anything else.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it is a good thing that we have, presidential candidates, really, preaching the message of what needs to be done, to engage the economic challenges, to also, remove the robust, the class, what he calls the hustlers from where they are, to also have a good share of the national resources. And also, I think in light of the fact that there are particular families or class that has conserved wealth at the expense of others, I think it's a good discussion moving forward. But I also don't think that somehow, because the voting pattern suggests the same, that Ruto's strongholds are the same. The Q who have always been against Odinga, the Kalenjin, the voting pattern has really not changed. But I think we cannot also take away the fact that there were issues being discussed, right? But for me, what I want to, I think, applaud is that even when you read the petition or even listen to commentary, the challenges they have of democracy are so different from us. For ours, it is we went to the polling station and they were pre-ticked, or someone came with a car, put their own ballot box and took where the people are voting. Theirs is, the entire petition is about the difference in tallying between the ones on the polling station and the ones that were computed. The problems are within the mathematics of if you added this, would get this. So you realize that no country perhaps does not have challenges in its electoral system here and there. But we want to have those problems as Uganda, where the problems are the mathematics. Not that we went to the polling station and we couldn't vote. They said you can only vote for an MP. Or you're there at Fort Bell, which is next to the Electoral Commission, and the ballot boxes come at 4 p.m. You get. And so for me, even when there are some illegalities, or even if the petition was to succeed, I think that they have really moved way above they've ticked most of the ballot boxes. So I want to applaud, but I think also what it needs to teach us is that democracy is expensive, and that we should be able to invest in it. You realize the process of Kenya it's really expensive, the different systems, but also that how Kenya has been determined to promote transparency. You realize that with their system, actually 3As, which is the first level of voting, those people declare. You get so literally the national returning officer or the National Electoral Commission, theirs is more of tabulation, verification, and announcing, as opposed to having a bigger centralized system. You get so for me, I cannot say that we should pick lessons for 2026, because I'm not sure the reason we don't have that process is because we don't know. I think the goodwill generally within our country doesn't exist, because these reforms in Kenya have been there for long. How they reformed the electoral, how they made their, I think, electoral boundaries commission independent and facilitated it. If anyone who does law will tell you that Kenya's revised constitution borrowed a lot from our 1995 constitution. So these countries really are so much close that they can always copy from each other the nice things. So for me, I wouldn't want to say, let's pick this, because we already see it, and everyone, it's not a far-fetched example. But maybe we can hope that in the future, maybe this generation of ours, which has seen this, can really fight for such transparency.
Okay.
For modern democracy problems, not the old democracy challenges of ballot stuffing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Comrade Kamakune, I know that you have a background of international relations and diplomacy. The personality of Right Honorable Raila Odinga at one point in a public discourse made this statement and said that Kenya should not be compared to other countries like Uganda, and he mentioned many others. That is one candidate. The other candidate, who is now president-elect, William Ruto, has been seen even campaigning for our president here in Uganda. So I think the two have different perceptions with which they perceive the country of Uganda. But in the broader sense, what does Ruto's presidency mean for the diplomacy of the region? But you could, specify on Uganda, or be specific on Uganda, vis-a-vis what does Raila Odinga's presidency mean for the diplomacy and relations within the region? Someone making those statements vis-a-vis someone who is campaigning for the other presidential candidate. So the aspect of international relations, which candidate do you think offers a better and progressive East African society?
Thank you, Kidega. I am happy to speak to regional integration, to the idea of regional integration, and I do not want to speak to the personalities of Ruto and Odinga, because I know that as a region we've been advocating for unity, like real integration in terms of trade, in terms of leadership, in terms of everything integration, really, respect for human rights, labor exchange, labor openness, open border policy, really, for labor especially. And I think for someone to make statements such as the Mr. Odinga said is a little taking us back in terms of our journey towards integration. And I know that the East African integration is not just beneficial for political reasons, but more for economic reasons, especially for young people. If I am qualified and can find a job in Kenya, why shouldn't I go? Why should I be considered less qualified or less able to do a job in Rwanda or Burundi or any other member of the East African community? And I know that different personalities say outrageous things oftentimes, but that doesn't always speak to doesn't represent the voice of general Kenya, the rest of the country. So I like us to take that statement as an isolated statement, and not the feelings of the rest of the member states or the rest of the citizens. And also, I think that as a region, we need to pick a lot from what happened in Kenya recently in terms of like he said, that they've raised to a level where their challenges in elections are verification, mathematics, and declaration, what finally is declared. In a country, we still have extreme electoral violence, extreme. Like, our challenges are maybe 1900. When just before we got even the idea of democracy, because, and he said, it's not because we do not know, it's the willingness. How are we willing? What is the participation levels of the citizens? We still have a huge chunk of people who think that the politics is none of their business, and forget that politics actually affects every aspect of life in a nation. The economy, the education, the health systems, everything in a nation, everything that's the lifeline of a nation is affected by politics. And so if you ignore the question of politics and what's happening in the political arena, you are killing everything that is the lifeline of a nation. So we need to pick a lot from Kenya in terms of willingness. What's our participation as a nation, especially young people? We cannot continue to sing statistics, and those statistics are not doing the work. I feel that if the young people, because the people we blame, biologically they'll be gone anytime. And if we keep blaming them and yet in ourselves are not learning and picking examples and trying to execute what we see our neighbors do, we will be singing this rant for much longer than we should be. Yes.
Yeah, but also, do you think that member states must be able to respect the independence of other member states' electoral processes?
That is what diplomacy is about. But as much as
because why I ask is, we saw Deputy President William Ruto coming to campaign for our president during the 2016 election. I'm not sure, but also there are certain, I don't know if they are fabricated or not, but we saw Ugandan vehicles with UG claiming to have been seen in Kenya, or well, allegedly. But also you can see that there is some sort of maybe interference. Well, it isn't proved yet, but you could see that there's some pocket cases of, Kenya trying to meddle in the affairs of Uganda's, processes, but also Uganda doing the same. So what does this mean generally for diplomacy and international relations?
So diplomacy is all about sovereignty, allowing the other state to be as sovereign as much as it can be, without interference of its neighbors or even bigger powers than just neighboring states. But like you've said, it's an allegation.
Yes, the allegation.
And leaders need to have either mentors or friends who guide them in terms of what works and what does not work. And so should a leader from Rwanda or Tanzania or Congo feel that they can pick a leaf from a leader in Kenya, I think
why not?
Why not? Why not?
Thank you, Kamakune. Garang, let me bring you in. I'm sure by now you know the principle of rule of law, and this, of course, as according to Professor Evi Dicey. Evi Dicey tells you that one of the key tenets of rule of law is independence of the judiciary. That for us to experience utmost rule of law, we must have an independent judicial process. I think the Kenya judiciary has been put on the spot not once and not twice, and have proven to have a semblance of independence. When you look at the David Maraga Supreme Court decision of 2013 that nullified a presidential election. So do you think that the independence of Kenya's Kenya's judiciary will still be a factor to look at in this presidential petition? Because many have argued that the current Supreme Court judge or justice is actually not as independent as David Maraga. Well, these are all allegations, but do you think that the independence of the judiciary has been compromised? That's one. But two, what do you think needs to be done for Uganda to reach the level of having an autonomous and independent judiciary? Is it the process through which judges are attained? And to this, maybe you'd comment about the appointment of 16 judges in acting capacity in the High Courts of Uganda. Don't these aspects affect the independence of our judiciary vis-a-vis the way through which judicial officers in Kenya are appointed?
Okay, thank you. It's a very long question, but I am sure I'll track it. So from the principle of rule of law, I think I agree with the good professor that the independence of judiciary is a good yardstick for the existence or non-existence of rule of law in any state. So if a judiciary can be able to exercise their own discretion and make decisions that would even compromise the power that appoint them or the powers that influence their appointment, then we can argue that such a judiciary is very independent. And I think, like you said, Kenya has done that once before, and Kenya has another chance to do the same. But also I want to also add that we don't want to look at the petition as more of a test a test at the ability of Martha, the Chief Justice, to be able to conform to the precedent that was set.
Okay.
But I think we want to look at it as an opportunity for her to then prove that if evidence exists or if it doesn't exist, I can still decide independently, regardless of what happened in the past or what can still happen.
She must look at the facts.
Exactly,
of the case.
because that is what the principle is. So if the Raila Odinga and the team, as they allege in their petition, if they can prove their allegations and the court looks at them, then the court decides. Even if it doesn't decide in a way that would be popularly said to be independent, as long as it has decided on facts and the principles of law, we can still argue that precedent has been followed and the judiciary is independent. And I think on Kenya, I think Kenya is moving, like the rest of us have said, Kenya is moving towards a very good direction, and anybody who wants to move towards that direction should be able to not just pick, because like Lawel said, we are no longer picking. Some of these things we know them, but to then make the decision intentionally to practice what Kenya is trying to practice. Because if you look at Kenya, Kenya started that shift when they decided to radically change their constitution. And because the previous constitution had issues. And then when they radically changed it, the constitution then started to channel all these things, including the reforms that happened within the IEBC. These are things that the IEBCs started to struggle to conform to what the new constitution demanded of it. And as a legal scholar, I felt that was good, because that is what the constitution is supposed to do, a light, like a lighthouse that guides how we move. So when it became a lighthouse that guided how the EBC moved, the IEBC moved, we saw how it came, the transparency, and how the election went. And we hope to see the same thing in how the court decides in conformity with the new constitution and the principles of rule of law. And if you ask me at personal level, I have a huge belief that the Kenyan judiciary system will not disappoint. Now, Uganda, you see, the problem with Uganda is that we have a constitution that has fundamentally placed power within few people or few powers. The entire 1995 constitution places enormous power in the hands of the president or the executive. And if that power exists, it compromises the ability of the principles of checks and balances to exercise their discretion. That even if there is a parliament, even if there is a court, even if there are other arms of government, and power has been inherently placed in the hands of the executive, it becomes hard for them to then check the executive. Because executive comes with the executive power comes with one of the biggest power in the state, the military might.
Let me just pause right there. So you don't think, for example, Article 108 that gives Parliament the capacity to either censure a cabinet minister, or Article 109 that gives the same Parliament capacity to render a vote of no confidence in the president, are in those aspects of checks and balances. Yes, you are the president, but Parliament can still check you. We saw the judiciary overturning a parliamentary law enacted, the 2000 Referendum Act, that court said that did not follow due process. So I think that there is an aspect of checks and balances.
Yes, it is. You see, we have to appreciate the grey grounds. We can't say extremely there is none, but from the greater good, from the greater perspective, there is little evidence to show that whatever the books say, whatever the principles say, is what is being practiced. Because even if you look at the parliament,
I'm giving you realistic examples.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, and those are just pockets of examples. If we started on examples, perhaps if I give you 10 or 15, you might just rest. And I don't want to do that today. So, but the point is, principally speaking, the constitution of Uganda is flawed. And the sooner we decide to radically change the constitution to place things in perspective, the easier it is to place the entire country in perspective. Now, on whether the judiciary of Uganda can be as independent as that of Kenya or any other state that has an independent judiciary, I want to speak like Lawel. It is not that we don't know it is important that the judiciary is independent. It is that we do not have the will to have the judiciary independent, because the independence of judiciary threatens powers upon which the greater powers rest, and the greater powers are not ready to relinquish the powers upon which they stand. And on the parliament, maybe in my conclusion, if the parliament is over half controlled by the political party that controls the executive, it is obvious that the parliament will make decisions that conform, and we have seen that. We saw that in the age limit. We also saw it in the term limits, because principally the parliament decides like that. But by ideally speaking, the parliament is influenced by forces to which the parliament conforms to. So I think for rule of law and for democracy to then start to grow in a country like Uganda, the powers that exist within the NRM government, or the space politically occupied by the NRM government, is too much for a political party. And if that has to happen, if there is a way of checking,
but
then
is there anything as too much if the people are actually electing?
Well, we can talk about if people are actually electing, because we saw the events in Toroti. We have seen the events that have happened even in by-elections. We saw the most recent election of 2021. You cannot have an election when the entire military is on street. The country wasn't at war.
You say people voting.
The country was not at war, and there was no justification for that military show. Like, it's almost what is happening around Taiwan. I mean, you're showing us that you can go to war. I am just a voter going to exercise my democratic right. Why are you showing me military terms? So that alone shows that the process of the voting is not as flawless as it should be. And if it is not, then the problems are fundamental.
Okay, fair enough. Just, Lawel, let me just keep it with you regarding the legal aspect. In 2008, when Kenya experienced the post-election violence, the people that are said that had the undertones of addressing this issue were President Museveni, that it was his wisdom that orchestrated that broad-based government. But also the official commission or mission of the Kofi Annan, UN Secretary General at the time, that came in to intervene to try and restore normalcy and all those things. So do you think that at times parties rush to seek redress from court, and yet there are other alternative dispute resolutions, like we saw in 2008? The parties did not go to court, but they said, okay, what is the issue? How can we address it? Can we form a broad-based government rather than us going to court? So do you think at times not all solutions lie in the legal jurisdiction?
I think you need to understand the difference in context. That when you have a functional country, then that's why we have a judiciary to resolve those things. But you know about, I think, Kelsen's theory about infectiousness, yes, that the fact that if the country is the system, the center can't hold. If, for example, you have a violence across the country, it means even the courts are not spared. So that means that within that country, the court itself cannot give you a solution, and then that's why you need bigger entities to come and find a solution. But in a normal functioning country with institutions and systems, then courts always really are the best place to find legal remedies. Maybe just what I wanted to comment about the checks and balances in our constitution. I should say that those checks and balances, to me, the problem is not that executive has a lot of power from the 1995 constitution. I think there are checks and balances. For example, term limits. That if you have term limits of 8 years, is that the judges won't be at the mercy of a particular president, because they can outlive that president. And that if you have another president, then they can also appoint new. I don't know if you get it. The problem is that the democratic, you see, we have a functioning democracy without democratic checks and balances. I don't know if you get it. So the framers of the 1995 constitution put that power, but also knowing that you're going to have different regimes. I don't know if you get. You look at the USA, for example, is that even when there is a Supreme Judge vacancy, you know that the next president will appoint. You know that this time it's going to be the Democratic Party. It's going to be the GOP. So I think for me, what we did, the Baganda have a saying, that the pilau, they ate the meat and left only the rice. You get. So for me, we have. We are using this democratic veil, but we picked out the checks and balances, which make democracy. So that's the missing piece.
So you think that amendment of certain articles affected the basic structure doctrine?
Yes, exactly. I said that the age limit, mostly, leave alone the age limit, the term limits were very important in democracy. And look at, for example, Kenya. Is that the reason why people are saying, you know, Kenyatta is briefing his state house staff and is moving, and it's a beautiful thing. Why he's not using a lot of state power is because he understands that his time is done and he has to hand over to someone else. And so, away from the other nitty-gritties of the constitution themselves, that the absence of those checks, democratic checks, creates a very big problem for any democratic country. But also, I think what I also wanted to discuss, which has not been discussed, are the new challenges of democratic countries. For example, the alleged Russia's intervention in the Trump election, the previous election, the rumored Museveni interference in the Kenyan. Perhaps it may not be true. What you're saying during examples may be good, but you don't want people of a different country to feel that it's not their vote that mattered. So I think that we should, as much as possible, refrain from being seen, not just doing, but being seen to meddle in the elections of other countries. But also when you read that petition, they talk about I think Venezuelans, they are foreigners who were captured, arrested within Kenya prior to the election, who had electoral material. And the allegations suggest that these people actually had control of the electronic material, that they had access to it, and that they could actually manufacture and change the tallying in the electronic system. And if you read that deeply, and like Garang said, they need provide evidence. But the current evidence from the investigative departments is that actually that access is there, right? And so for me, I look at, as much as we have these functional democracies, we seem to have new challenges that seem to alter the voice of the people, and that for us as a young generation again, which is planning, we should also put into perspective those new challenges that are going to come. To attain the democracy we want.
Thank you. Fair enough. Kamakune, let me come to you. The aspect of women in politics, I think we ought to give it some time to discuss it and maybe touch a light into it. The personality of Martha Karua as a running mate to the Azimio la Umoja, camp, a former MP, a former Minister of Constitutional Affairs, a renowned advocate of the High Court. I mean, she had all it took to, be even a president herself. But in her own backyard, her camp was defeated. So do you think that whereas we are applauding Kenya's democracy and how they've grown in terms of democratic principles, do you think they've still forgotten the aspect that we must intentionally empower women so as they can be able to scale up to the level of everyone else in society? So do you think there are still some aspects of patriarchy in Kenya's politics vis-a-vis Uganda, which seems to have taken a stride in terms of empowering women? You know that Article 32 provides for affirmative action, but also you know that the cabinet of Uganda, there are so many women. So do you think that whereas Kenya is doing well in terms of electoral democracy, Uganda is doing better in terms of maybe empowering and uplifting women?
I do not want to say that Kenya is doing badly in terms of affirmative action, because I see very powerful Kenyan women, of which I feel that when it comes to national leadership and the place of the president, we've not had as many women go up to that level. And that's not even, it's not questionable in Uganda. When we had one lady president, not even the ladies who are the majority voted her. And same applies to Kenya. So the individual, the person of Martha Karua and her strength and everything cannot water down the fact that there is affirmative action, but perhaps the willingness for us to push more women to national leadership, even when they stand, they don't seem to have the much support, because the idea of patriarchy is not just in Kenya. It's still all over Africa, and people still feel that women are not capable of being national leaders, which is wrong, which is wrong. I feel that when we thought that women can't be members of parliament, and then affirmative action gave them the space, we have more women even running for direct positions.
That's true.
So if we continue to raise more women to those places, I know in the near future we will have women presidents, but that does not water down the idea that affirmative action is actually achieving. It's achieving a lot. I see a lot of CEOs. I see a lot of very influential leaders who are women, even if they are not necessarily the president. And I believe in the idea of being able to deliver even when you are not in top position, able to influence. For example, Kenya has a female chief justice, and I know Uganda can have a female chief justice if we wanted, or if we push them to that particular space. So I think our question should be, how do we dismantle the patriarchy at the presidential level? Regionally, say, for example, in East Africa. Tanzania, I don't want to say that in Tanzania they would have elected a female president. Circumstances put her in that particular position. And I know she's doing a good job, but if we went to the ballots, I don't feel that regionally we are still able to, we have dismantled the patriarchy question as a nation, and both women and women, young people and old people, we still have the fear of being led by a woman. And I think that's the thing we need to dismantle as much as we can.
Fair enough. But do you think Uganda has made effort in terms of dismantling that? For example, you look at the presidential appointments to cabinet, the vice president.
Definitely.
You look at the prime minister. You go to a parliament, the speaker being a woman. So do you think Uganda, even with its flaws, with its setbacks notwithstanding, has made 2 steps forward in terms of achieving?
I want to think yes, and I have my reservations on how and why and who, but I want to think that it's a step towards dismantling that. And I also want to make this very outrageous statement. I hope you guys forgive me, that we realize that the people trying to tear down, for example, the female speaker, the female prime minister, are people who still believe in that idea of patriarchy. They cannot see a female leader of parliament. They cannot see a female prime minister, and it's sad. Really, it's sad, because when we go to what work is the speaker doing, if she's doing her work right, does her sex really matter? If the prime minister is doing her work correct, no matter how shrewd and whichever character she seems to appear into, but is she doing her work right? And if she's doing that, I feel that the president made a good move to push women to that space. And I know that for so many people who had never seen a female prime minister for this country now know it's possible. So the next president needs to know that he needs to balance his cabinet. For example, you can't just have men, because we've seen previously that women can't do the same job. Yes. So going back to your question, yes, Uganda has made a good progress towards putting women into meaningful, powerful positions.
Okay, maybe that's where we say kudos to the NRM. Shivan, let me come to you. Let's discuss some economy. Yeah. We know that Kenya has been a big market for Uganda in terms of maize and other things, but also we know that in the past, post-elections have affected the economic movement of, for example, commodities, but also the movement of persons, because we saw so many Kenyans coming into Uganda and closing their businesses and things like that. So in your own analysis, in your own words, do you think that the mere fact that Kenya is going through a peaceful post-election so far, we hope that the already beaten economy of both countries, Uganda and Kenya, because you know that Kenya has a very high debt burden. I think in the region they have the highest debt burden. And therefore the economy needs to be on its feet, 24/7. So do you think that what we are seeing so far, the peaceful nature of the post-election, do you think that there is some hope for Ugandans to have that, the economy will continue working? Or do you think that it's only a matter of time before things take a setback?
Of course, it's going to be a matter of time in my own analysis, because looking at how they held a very peaceful, they're having a very peaceful post-election period, but the economy itself needs to be worked on. And now the fact that there are people had to leave and others come this side and others are now held the other side, it's really going to take them time, because generally looking at how they have, it has a very high debt, and the fact that I also look at it having a high population, they are going to need time. They're going to really need time to work on the economy, and I think we should give them a matter of time.
Okay, fair enough. Lawel, let me just come to you. I find the person of Deputy President William Ruto very interesting, and I think this is my personal opinion. I think I followed him and I've read about him, and I think he presents a very unique character, his story, whereas there could be some inconsistencies in the story being told. I think that the whole hustler, movement, the whole hustler nation idea is one worth, welcoming. But I think let's cast a light onto what William Ruto is doing right now. The other camp has rushed to go to court. William Ruto on this other side is poaching or welcoming more MPs who were elected on the independent ticket or were elected under the Azimio la Umoja coalition are now crossing to Kenya Kwanza. So do you think that one is a practical politician, whereas the other is more of a boardroom, more of a desktop politician, and the other is practical, is getting onto ground, getting MPs to join his side, building his camp. The other is practicing politics of I don't know, the basics.
Kidega, to say that is just to disregard or to show that you perhaps have not addressed your mind to really the history and the politics of Kenya. People who have seen what Odinga has gone through in the fight itself, the fight against Arap Moi, the fight against an insurmountable odds, being an exilee and all those sorts of things. I think the fact that he is from a privileged class does not take away his sacrifice as an individual. But even to look at his losing of elections and the going to court, even the 2007 post-violence period, the petition in the former election and this one, realize that Odinga's role in Kenyan politics is why we actually have this growth in democracy. And even the growth in the economics, because the growth in economics is contingent on the stability of the country, on the faith of the country. I also think that Ruto is really a nice...
Do you also think that he has caused some instability in that process?
I think
no. In 2013, he put the Uhuru or Jubilee government on standstill, literally. Yes, there was no economic activity going on, all these walk-to-work things. So whereas, yes, you could say he has played a role in building the economy, but also he has taken, he has made some steps backwards.
Yes, when you pay attention to one of the oldest or even the best constitutional historian, he's called David Starkey from the UK. He says that to look at constitutional reforms and growth, they are always against a background of violence, of war, and such conflict. And you cannot say for sure that one, that the conflict he caused was not legitimate, or that it is not because of that conflict and how well it was managed that you have the growth. But what I'm saying about Odinga does not take away the fact that Ruto also is playing a very important part. I think the difference between Ruto and Odinga is a shrewdness, that Ruto is very shrewd, and he's a better politician in when you use Ugandan way of looking at politicians to describe the two, the idea that someone is shrewd, that they will do everything possible to take power. I can tell you for sure that Ruto and Uhuru perhaps had capacity to use the state infrastructure to influence some of these things, but they restrained. I don't know if you get my point. That Ruto is more honest. And for me, maybe I'm biased, but when you look at his track record, the handshakes and all those things, people think. So the people who judge Ruto for being a passive, who judge Odinga for being a passive character, are those who are used to the Ugandan shrewdness of saying, you have to do everything possible to get this seat. I don't know if you get it. That you know, this whole handshake thing and thinking that, you know, he's not a fighter, for me is a bad way of looking at Odinga. But I also think that doesn't take away the fact that Ruto is a shrewd politician. He has disrupted the terrain and all those sorts of things. I think we can still praise him without necessarily saying Ruto is a passive player. I think he has been the biggest reformist in that country. But I also think that the fact that I don't think Ruto is a hustler, right? I think he was in the Arab Moi's government as it was ending up until now. I think he has joined the bourgeoisie. I think he's even more wealthier than even those he says are classists. But I think that the message he preaches, even if he is not a hustler, the fact that he tells hustlers it's your time, I think for me also is a good campaign from him, right? So I think, well,
it's a strategy.
It's a strategy, which is also good. The fact that the bigger masses also have a say. You get, you know, they're called blessings in disguise. You're lying to people, but what you're lying to them is actually good for them. So it's good for him to preach the message of we need to redistribute resources, of we need hustlers to leave the ghetto and also be part of the leadership. So for me, I'm okay with your assessment of Ruto. What I'm not okay with is the disregard for the humongous job.
So what do you think about him, you know, having more MPs joining his camp?
I think it's a shrewd politics of saying, yes, you know, you're getting people as much as possible also, but also you want to divert the conversation and show that me, I'm already working, I'm the president. I don't know if you get it. When you've done the politics, you know that even if you have a petition, you need to continue working and assume legitimacy. And you get my point. And also, but of course, all that will depend on the Supreme Court. And most of also these crossing people are crossing not necessarily because they believe in Ruto, because they had a chance to do it before the election, but because they understand the tides are changing. And Kenya, when you look Kenyan politics, it's about, you know, what is moving, alliances here and there. And so for me, it's not really surprising. I think he's doing what he should do as a shrewd politician. Of course, all that is again contingent on the electoral petition. But what we also need to know that this petition is quite different from the last. This one actually seems to point to character, to the character of Chebukati and his relationship with Ruto. If the petition comes against Chebukati and Ruto, it will affect his integrity, which he has been not posturing, which has been depicting.
Oh, Chebukati is...
no, Ruto himself, because he has been showing integrity, he has been crying in churches and all those sorts of things. Should the evidence point to the fact that actually Chebukati and Ruto unscrupulously created those electoral problems, it will affect the outcome of the next election. And I think that the distinction is different from the last election, where the chair EC was exonerated and they decided to just have a re-election. But whereas, again, like he said, that evidence is subject to examination.
Fair enough. Garang, just in 2 minutes, let me just read for you some of the players who will be performing for us in the Supreme Court. The Azimio La Umoja camp, led by, I think, James Orengo, Paul Mwangi, Philip Mwogo, and all those other guys. Then you look at the president, the William Ruto team being led by Fred Ngatia. You look at the likes of Professor Kithure Kindiki. You know, then you look at the IEBC team. You know, Githu Mungai. So I think they are the cream de la cream of the law in Kenya. Absolutely. So should we expect both camps presenting the best argument come, you know, I think the hearing begins tomorrow or something, or today. So what do you expect? Do we expect rule of law? Do we expect, you know, debates at its best? Do we expect facts being put out top notch?
So as a legal scholar,
of course, we shall miss PLL Lumumba, but I think it's coming as amicus curiae.
Yes.
I think you'll be
as a legal scholar, I think we're going to have the most interesting of arguments happening, because these are the top tier lawyers of the country.
Yeah.
And the case at hand is not just some chicken theft case or something. This is an issue of national importance. It's about the integrity of the Electoral Commission. It's about the legitimacy of the results announced by Chibukati. So it is not something that anyone can take for granted. And then also with the credentials of the lawyers involved, this is the case that any lawyer would want to give their best in their career.
That's right.
That's it. So I don't expect the least. And then also in how that plays out in the outcomes, when there is quality involved in the process of argument, in the process of trying to prove and disprove, when quality and everybody has been seen to exercise their very best, we can only watch at how the court exercises its jurisdiction, its independence and its discretion to value everything said, everything presented, and then make a decision. And trust me, the whole world is watching. The whole world is watching. But then, on the Ruto-Raila dynamics and how that plays in, you see, one thing I want to comment on is that William Ruto is a real politician, and I don't think anyone still disagrees, because even what you call poaching, and I think I agree with the word used. These people are also seeking their interests, like Lawel said. They know that the power dynamics are changing. Yeah. And for some reasons, they expect the decision from the court to be in their favor. So the presidency will remain the Kenya Kwanza's thing. So they are investing in their own personalities. But even William Ruto already, as a politician, the one that I've been following, this guy is investing in the second term already, when the first term is still being questioned in the court. So he's looking for support for the second term. And this is why the inlet is this open, and the message is, we are uniting Kenya. Please come in. We are thanking you, as he normally says on a daily basis. We thank this camp for coming. We have space for everyone, and this is a strategy to rally popularity, and also this is a strategy to show Kenyans, and if there are any naive Kenyans that can agree with him, that you see I am the most attractive and people are already coming, and even if they think that I am not legitimately elected, the people that voted, even the leaders that you elected are also sure that I was legitimately elected, and then we can therefore ask the court or whoever thinks we were not legitimately elected. So in other words, he's looking for popularity of sympathy. That term exists. So it becomes popular by sympathy of the vast majority of people, thinking that, well, if the majority agrees with him, I think he's right. That is what he's investing in. So he's a practical politician. He's a practical, intelligent politician. Yes. You can give that to him.
Kaboyo, as we take a short commercial break, yes, we are praising Kenya's democracy. And I think largely there is consensus here that Kenya is growing in its electoral democracy. But I think there's still some lack of originality that we have seen. For example, if you look at the choice of words, Kenya Kwanza, that is literally meaning Kenya first. You look at Azimio la Umoja, one Kenya coalition.
Declaration of unity.
Yes. So I don't see so much originality. There is either one is copying from the other or something like that. One said freedom is coming. The other said freedom is here. So I think there is not so much originality. So do you think that African leaders still lack generic ideas on how to transform their societies and transform their nations, but rather they just keep on copying from one another?
I do not think that coping is such a big issue in this conversation. What I really think is important is what I think they are really addressing is what is the question on ground. If we need freedom, if you can give us freedom, he can give us freedom. We will all call for freedom. I don't think that ideas are the most important aspect of leadership. It is the ability to address the challenges of the time.
Oh, okay.
In my opinion, which I think is the most viable opinion, if you have ideas from the future and they do not address challenges of today, then I do not think they are as important.
Right.
So really to that particular question you've asked is if their question at the moment is need for freedom to be able to address the rest of the challenges,
or need for national unity.
Exactly.
And therefore it's okay for both camps.
It's actually okay for them to call for the same. At the end of the day, we will question them or check them on how much of that they have achieved in their term
Because
of
why
leadership.
I ask is because if there is not a very clear cut in terms of manifesto, then the voter also finds it hard to know, okay, this side is saying this message, so now who do I go with? I mean, it is a blurred line.
Correct.
It isn't very clear.
Yes, that's true. But
Because now
again,
that affects the civic competence of the voter if the messages are almost the same.
I agree.
Yeah, but if it's clear cut,
But
for
the
example,
major thing,
the USA, the
Conservative.
Democrats will say we don't want guns in people's hands. These guys are saying no, guns are actually okay. Clear cut.
that's true.
Yeah.
But what I'm really trying to say is that manifestos and documentation of what you are intend to achieve is just dynamics. The question is, are you addressing the challenges of that time? And if at the moment our major challenges are similar, again, we're going to question you on how are you able to address those particular challenges. So for example, for me, if the opposition and government had a similar manifesto and my only job is to question them on how are they able to achieve that manifesto or the ideas in the manifesto, then it doesn't matter if they actually have similar manifestos as long as they address the nation's challenges.
Okay, fair enough.
On this particular one, I just wanted to add, you see, political slogans stem from what the vast majority of people are presumed to want. So it is a message that resonates with the people that they go for. For example, when they say Kenya Kwanza, Kenya first, there is a vast majority of hustlers that believe that there has been a dynastic dynamics in the politics of Kenya, that it has been two families and then they are not putting the country first. And perhaps Ruto wants to invest in that to seek popularity. When you look at, as you know, La Umoja, Declaration of Freedom, where have we not been free? He thinks there are Kenyans who still believe they are not free, and he thinks he delivers that. So they don't have to be very different. They just have to resonate with the people. Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Just lastly, as we go for the break, Shivan, I think that the aspect of our morals as an African society is still up for question, because you look at two candidates in this election. We had George Wajakoya, who was proudly associating himself with the whole, ganja thing.
Rastafari.
Yeah, Rastafarian. Then you had David Waihiga, who is actually a pastor or,
Man of God.
a man of God.
Yeah.
But the ganja man actually got more votes than the pastor. So, I don't know, what does this say about our moral fabric as an African society?
Of course, looking at the African setting, morals are very paramount here. We are very, very big on morals. I do not know how a ganja man convinces the electorates to vote for him than a pastor. Because with the appearance of a pastor in society, you're looked at as the one that is holier than thou.
Morality.
Yeah, so you're looked at as the biggest example. You know what is right. You know that this one shouldn't be oppressed. You know this one should be oppressed. So you have that big applaud from society itself. But then the other thing is, generally when I was following this Kenyan election, Kenyans vote, I saw that Kenyans vote for ideas. I looked at how Ruto came through and won this election. Raila was there, but Ruto convinced people. He's a great politician. He knew that hustlers, the classes that were being created by the other two families, and he came and addressed the hustlers. So looking at this man, the ganja man that actually won this election, I mean that won the pastor, he might have convinced people enough. You can be a ganja man but still have the right ideas. You fit in addressing the issues of these.
His ideas were actually, we need to legalize the selling of marijuana. Yes.
And that is a lot of money, literally, like he said. A lot of money for a struggling economy. Because you look at, I've seen people that have invested in selling marijuana and they have money, they have houses. So he might have addressed that and even looking at, he also has followers. The people that believe in marijuana, we've seen people that believe in these drugs, that they actually tell you drugs are even our gods. So literally, he might have sold the idea to them, and people look at it and they're like, literally. And we've seen, I can give an example of our own here, Muntu, General Mugisha. He's a godly man, but we've seen how he has lost an election. Yet he has great ideas.
People want the ghetto guy.
Yeah, people are opting for everyone because he's giving them the things they want. Ugandans, they want to go here, smoke, what. They believe he's one of their own that has come from them.
Only that they have still continued to choose the old man.
Have they?
Yeah, at least according to what the EC tells us.
Yeah.
But also, largely, I hold the opinion that he has continued to win support of the people. Yeah. And that's my opinion.
That's your opinion.
I think that the Wajakoya and the Waihigi situation really, I think, speaks so much to whether you are speaking about ideas or whether your personality will, help
Really
you
matter.
transcend. Well, that takes us to a short commercial break. We hope that you are enjoying this conversation. My advice is just stick on to this show because we shall be shortly back after a minute and we'll continue right away. Thank you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Well, we'll be back from that short commercial break and we hope that you are enjoying this conversation. Well, for those of you who drive manual cars, you know that time comes when you have to shift a gear. So now we are shifting the gear to discuss the aspect of Uganda Airlines. About a week ago, media was awashed by the Honorable Senyonyi-led commission of COSASE that was investigating the mode through which the appointment of the CEO of Uganda Airlines was reached, but also areas around the credibility of the office bearer, areas around the process through which this office bearer got to office were all in question. Well, we also know that the same Honorable Member of Parliament said that, he allegedly said that he is being threatened, he's receiving phone calls. Well, I don't know, are there other powers behind this particular individual? Well, the Youth Roundtable will explore that just in a moment. Lawel Muhwezi, let me begin with you. What do you make of this? The whole investigation, someone saying that, yes, I'm holding office, but I cannot trace my academic documents. Yes, I'm holding office, but I was actually called on a day when, I was just going somewhere, then I was called. Does this speak about the nature of the public service in Uganda?
You see, I am passionate about democracy, but I also know that authoritarian governments actually, and most times actually do well with economics because they don't have a lot of bureaucracy because, somehow because I don't think the Asian tigers are famous for being the most democratic. I don't think China, the Communist Party is as liberal. So dictators, most authoritarian regimes have a way of doing that thing. I just don't know why African authoritarian governments cannot seem to do well. Because if you settle the political worries, then you should be able to work, right? And so for me, having our president, such an authoritarian president, and then failing even at things like these, then it's a problematic. In China, you are corrupt even if you are a millionaire or billionaire. You're killed. I don't know if you get it. So for me, I don't want to really discuss whether she's qualified or not.
Okay.
You get? My problem is how she gets the job. You're appearing before the parliamentary committee and you say that I didn't even qualify. I was just called and given the job. But we are here and we have women who are passionate about affirmative action, which is essentially about equal opportunity regardless of gender. And that principle must be upheld in every aspect. That
That's right.
people must be given equal opportunity. If you have advertised for the job, let people come with their credentials and the best take the job. We know there are things, for example, called headhunting, where there's an expert somewhere. But even then, there must be a transparent process where they beat the rest of the people who have applied. And so we cannot have a country where people are just given phone calls. But why do we have even these compulsory, because we have processes, procurement, etc., which prescribe a process by which someone gets a contract, how someone gets a public job, and all these are disregarded. And we're taken in this discussion of whether she did also, it doesn't matter whether she has a degree or not. The degree she claims to have is not what is prescribed in the job description. And those things matter. And so for me, I don't go in the discussion of whether her transcript is at Makerere or not. It's that she does not qualify. But only does she not disqualify, the process was not given a chance. There's no equal opportunity. Because we have a lot of parents here who take their kids to university. They become the best students from Makerere, from Chambongo, from UCU, from Kisubi. And these people deserve equal chance when applying for jobs. And so for people to think that they can come from anywhere and get jobs at the disregard of other people who have attained qualifications is problematic, right? Because we can also talk about, for me, I don't want to discuss even the economics. Just
hold it right there. I want to bring in Shivan. Shivan, the person in question is, of course, a woman. And the undertones that have been coming out and said that, she's being witch hunted because she's a woman. So do you think that those who are trying to wear the gender lens are being unfair to Ugandans?
Exactly. We can't even debate about that. However much we believe in affirmative action and everything, we need to be realistic. This is an airline that is being run by a woman, which is okay. The 40 people that were also applying for this job, I'm sure there were men, and of which these men also have the qualifications. So we should not
And I wish there were
victimize.
other women as well.
Yeah, and were other women that actually invested in even taking a civil aviation degree. And we know how civil aviation in this country is a very expensive degree. So literally you look at this woman coming in place for whatever case that she was appointed for, I do not know. And now people are just victimizing because she is a woman. How are we going to grow as a country? If we are really still lagging on that, because we want women to be empowered, there are women that have competencies. I'm sure that the other people that also applied for the job, there are women that have done a lot, that they feel they can run the airline thing. We are seeing that the loss the loss that is taking place in the airlines. This woman can be crucified enough because she is the CEO. Why are things not in place? So literally, we should stop the victimizing and be realistic enough. If we want the country to grow economically and everything, let us address these issues. She cannot be appointed just because there is a hidden agenda that we do not want to know, that the media has not yet made us aware of, simply because she is whatever she is. Let us also look at the other people that need to be empowered because they have invested in taking on what needs to be done. There are people with better ideas, with better competences, with better skills, with better qualifications, actually. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Garang, let me come to you. We know that public servants in Uganda are governed by administrative law, but also we know that we have the public service standing orders. Do you think that there is a lacuna in the law, and that is why we are seeing such things, coming up, that someone gets to a public office in a manner that is questionable, in a manner that, leaves Ugandans wanting? So do you think that this is an aspect of a lacuna in the law, or it is just people who know the law, but they choose just not to abide by it, because they feel that there is some overarching superior authority?
So I think the problem is not the law. The problem is that people don't want to practice the law. Because the act that establishes the Public Service Commission, and also the same public service falls under the Ministry of Works and Transport. All these things are in place, including the procedure that demands that people, before they are appointed, actually apply. Then the committee sits, vets them, then they are appointed into public offices. The procedure is there. The act stipulates everything else. But in the appointment of this particular CEO, there has been a complete, and I think I want to call it an absolute I'm looking for a very radical word. But until I find that word, what I want to mean is there was a complete disregard of what the law actually says.
Okay.
And that was done without remorse, without any expectations of someone will ever question. I don't think the appointment of this lady anyone thought would ever be questioned. And that for me was problematic. Administratively, you cannot do something you know is against administration, and then you appear to look like you never even expected anyone to question it. And then also, because according to the story that the media publishes and also the statements she says in the interviews we have seen on television when she's being interviewed, she says that she did not apply. And the act demands, the procedure demands you apply. She didn't apply. That's one. Number two, the qualification she alleges to have, which existence is still questionable. So let's assume they exist. They are not the qualifications that are stipulated for the job she has been given.
Yes.
Then number three, where does her appointment come from? She claims, the people that appointed her claim they received a call from the president who directed the minister or the Ministry of Works and Transport. Then the ministry directs the appointment of the lady and she's appointed. Where in the law is that what it's supposed to happen? So the short answer is the law exists, the law stipulates, but then people disregard the law. So where is the problem? The bigger problem is, why do we think that in 2022, in a democracy that's growing, we still think it is very possible to receive orders through a phone call and abide by them? Yes, the president is an authority, but I think sometimes we need to take principled decisions that if I receive a call from the president, and I know that's not what the law say, I would rather be fired. But when I have said that I want to abide by the procedure. So I think the people at the ministry and the people that appointed the lady did not abide by what the law says, because they had to compare what to follow, the law or the orders from the president. And they chose the orders of the president for reasons that they know. So principally speaking, had they chosen the law, the entire country would rally behind them. Now, conclusively, I don't think the problem is the qualification of Jennifer. I don't think the problem is the personality of Jennifer. The problem is the dynamics of her appointment. I think anyone in her position would have gone through the same thing. And that's why I agree with Shivan when she said that the people that are playing gender card are being victims. They are being unfair, because that's just victimhood. They think it will favor them just like victimhood has favored so many people. So the issue is, why is it possible for people for the president to give such orders when the president knows the law? Then secondly, why is it possible for people to conform to those orders and for that to happen? So even if she was qualified, her appointment procedure was wrong. So, but then as a country, we don't seem to look at the qualification. We seem to look at how do we quickly get her out of the office because she was not legitimately appointed. So even if she was the most qualified person for the job,
still needs to
there is a reason why there is a criteria for appointment. Yes.
Wow, these are very solid arguments. Kamakunde, let me come to you. In the past, many have actually accused or castigated Parliament of Uganda for being a rubber stamp and for lacking the authority to stand up to the executive. But I think that this Parliament has proven us otherwise, at least in some instances. For example, you look at the Mwine Mpaka-led commission that investigated the Vinci Coffee deal. Then now you're looking at the Honorable Joel Senyo Nikosase commission that is investigating another, fraud executive, decision. So do you think that Parliament is gradually beginning to legitimize its presence, to say that, guys, we are actually a Parliament that can work for Ugandans and we can hold the executive accountable?
I think it shouldn't just be beginning. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing,
which they haven't been doing in the
which
past.
they've not been doing. So I want to say maybe this lot of leaders are less
Conforming.
are less conforming, but also they are not afraid by the powers that that law are above them and dictate and give direction to how things should run, which usually is contrary to how they actually should run, by considering what they're supposed to do. So I think Parliament at the moment is doing their job. Like he said, I do not think that it is right for you to put out a procedure for people to apply and get into a certain position and then override it and a point before due process has actually happened. So like Garang and Muhwezi have said, we just need this woman to go. the question is not even on her education. It's not about her qualification. It's not about whether she's a woman or not. She just is in office illegitimately, and that should be the area of discussion. But also for people to think that they can appoint anyone whenever they want is wrong, especially for a crippling airline in the region that is not making money. When this discussion came up, I started reading on flourishing airlines in Africa, and I figured that Ethiopian Airlines has grown so tremendously since 2019. Just before we got into COVID, we thought everyone had gone, down that slope. And then Ethiopian Airlines just continues to thrive. And I know there's a general feeling that airlines are performing badly, but compared to all African airlines, Ethiopian Airlines is doing well. Egypt Air is doing well. And you know why? Because they have decided to commercialize their airlines. Governments do not take decisions on who leads the airlines, how much money is paid to whoever, how money comes into it. Is entirely commercial. And if we spend so much money on procuring, planes, we should make sure that they give us returns. And the way to go is to go commercial. And if we went commercial, we wouldn't be making stupid mistakes like just appointing anyone to lead such a big
brand
money bringing in entity, something that brings in so much money. We wouldn't play around with it. But because we are not really interested, I feel that we have very little interest, or there is no proper structure to make sure that our country is getting out of debt line. Meanwhile, these planes we are putting under shoddy leadership were bought with a lot of money of Ugandans' money. So the quicker we realize this money back, the better. And that's why we should not be playing around on who leads such an entity. They must be able to make money back. There must be, representation of a serious person. I cannot believe there's this one statement. She said that if they were not doing a good job, the plane would have fallen from the sky. And I was like, what? Did you just say that? We are here questioning how much money you are making since you came into office, how much the airline is trying to make sure we recover, how much money we invested in to buy these planes, and you're just saying we've not fallen out of the sky. Aren't we down on the ground without money?
Good question. Lawel, I was actually coming to you. I can see your hand is up. But Lawel, just let's first keep to Parliament just a little bit. The principle of separation of powers is very important. The executive, and this I would say that fear of contradiction, has been seen in some instances to interfere with the independence of either the judiciary or of the legislature. You recall the Black Mamba incident, where the judiciary was under military attack. In 2017, we saw armed, security operatives storming Parliament and attempting to influence the decisions of an organ that is supposed to be independent. Now, we have seen the Joel Senyonyi Commission, and the chairperson in this case saying that he's under threat. He has received phone calls that are threatening him. So do you think that we will ever have a situation where there is complete separation of powers? That when they are investigating an executive decision, the executive will not interfere completely? Or this goes back to the politics that we are discussing earlier on, that because we have bad politics, or maybe in your words, that because we have bad politics and therefore issues around separation of powers are far-fetched?
Kidega, I'm very optimistic. I think it is possible that we are going to have a time when there is independence of the judiciary, like we're giving examples of Kenya. But I think, of course, it's going to be a product of a general discussion and a generational cause. That the young people, and I keep saying that if we decide of the country we want, then all these things are going to be possible. And for me, I'm okay with having discussions of 15 years, 20 years to come, because we are likely to be the political players. And that if we decide that this is the country we want, I think it is possible. For me, I really think it is possible if we are determined to do that. But for me, I want to also applaud Parliament where they have worked. I think we need to credit we need to credit Parliament where they've come up to put these people to task. For me, it doesn't matter whether Jennifer remains or not, but the fact that Parliament, at least which exists on our behalf, is able to do those checks and balances and say, look, this is the problem we have, right? I think it's a good step in the right direction. But for me, when she was speaking, there's something that triggered my mind. Perhaps the structure adjustment policies were actually good for Uganda in particular. Because you realize that actually some things are safer in private hands. Because what we have is that we have a problem in our governance as a country. What happened with Jennifer is just a microcosm of what happens within how we employ our leaders in different parastatals and ministers. Look, the gentleman said, if you were me, what would you have done? The gentleman who employed Jennifer said, I got a call. If you were in my chair, what would you have done? And all of us understood him. Why? Because we know that's what happens. Which means that while perhaps we have all these things going wrong, it's not that merely the president is incompetent, one, but that he has not superintended or has not supervised or made sure that these parastatals are functional. So you have a group of individuals who are employed across and they're incompetent or they do not qualify, which perhaps has a ripple effect on performance of all government structures, right? And so like she says, you are guaranteed that if Uganda Airlines was under private ownership, it would not be susceptible to the irregularities, to the incompetence of government itself. So it would thrive. You get my point? And so perhaps the privatization, in light of our regime, of our government, as Uganda in particular, perhaps they helped us. Who knows if we had remained with all these parastatals in the hands of government, going through this undue regard for criterion, where would we be? Maybe it would be worse. You get? When you are under private ownership, you are under appraisal of your employer. You're promoted based on how much you performed, or you're even fired. But when you're under government, you have no one to whip you. I don't know if you get it. You can do what you want. This lady can afford to say, you're lucky that the plane hasn't fallen to the ground. But you couldn't say that if you're in someone's private entity. You can tell them you're lucky I haven't closed the shop. How do you tell me that? You get my point? Because your task is to make sure you're appraised on your performance. And so that triggering is good. And that's what I want to talk about is my respect for young people who choose to work in NRM government. I feel that it is good that they are contributing to the nation building. My question is, when that time comes, when they are going to be forced to do some of these things, how are they going to balance their character and their future? I had a lot of respect for Katumba Wamala as a public servant, as a man, but now he cannot convince me. I don't care whether it is Museveni who gave him the directive, but he should have stood his ground, perhaps resigned. You can't have this happening. And so for me, for people, I don't want to mention names, but for my colleagues, my good friends who cross to the NRM and have these positions, I worry for their character, if it matters to them. Because if you are put in a position where you need to appoint someone, yet you know the right thing to do, what are you going to do?
Okay, fair enough. How I wish Comrade Muhwezi was here. I'm sure you would be giving a very good argument to defend that position. Well, Shivan, let me just come to you. I have read Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, and she says that issues of discrimination, issues of racism can be addressed by grit, which is merit. That if you're good at what you do, it shouldn't matter whether you're black or white. For as long as you are good at what you do, people will come for you. I don't know, maybe Jennifer is actually good at what she was appointed to do, and that the issues around her qualifications, maybe we are approaching it from the wrong way, and that we are putting so much focus on the formal, qualifications and forgetting maybe she's a practical, hands-on airline person. Okay, because there is this whole narrative. There is this whole narrative that the white man has given us. You must go to school, you must get a document from Makerere and all those things. And we are forgetting that what matters at the end of the day is someone's practicability. Can they get the job done? And that qualifications at times cannot matter.
How do you qualify?
I'll give you an example.
I'd like to speak to
a powerful jurist that the Lawels and Garangs know, Lord Denning, actually had a background of being a mathematician. But then when he joined the law profession and became and became one of the best, if not the best.
But wasn't appointed as a doctor.
Jurist. You see, so the point I'm trying to put here is that at times we could focus on someone's qualification and forget that they're actually practical and hands-on on the job. I don't think Wapakabulo, as the Speaker of Parliament, was a lawyer. Was he a lawyer? I don't think he was a lawyer.
It's not a qualification to be a
Yes,
lawyer.
exactly. You don't have to be.
But I get his point.
But there is this whole notion of, to be a Speaker of Parliament, you must be a lawyer. But Wapakabulo did an amazing job, and he was not even a lawyer. So I don't know. Are we pushing it maybe from the wrong angle?
Yeah. To me, I feel like you're pushing it from a wrong narrative, because it is a job description, and they have put it in the job description that these are the things that are needed. The reason. It's just like how I would be applying for an HR job. If I've not taken a degree in HR management, how best am I going to do
Because
that?
why I'm saying that is we have to put job description on the spotlight, because young people have been complaining that these job descriptions are actually unfair. They ask for 10 years of experience,
but
which young people don't have, right? So should we uphold these job descriptions when they don't concern us, but bash them when they are against us?
No.
Context.
It doesn't work like that. Because generally, when looking at whatever the white man narrative is that we need to go to school, I actually believe that we need to go to school to be empowered. Because literally, if Jennifer Mamturachi was appointed the CEO and she took a degree in SWASA, Social Work and Administration, from Makerere University, of which we do not even know whether she took that degree. But literally, here you are running an airline and things are in berserk. If maybe she was doing a great job, we would still side with that and be like, okay, she doesn't have the qualifications, but she's doing it well. The same applies to the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Health. She did the degree, but even she doesn't know how to run the ministry herself. She does the technical part of the ministry, which is where the ministry lies upon, but things are always in berserk. We saw what happened in COVID. So literally... Because
what I'm asking is that, for example, do you doubt Honorable Frank Muhwezi's performance as IST Minister?
Agriculture Minister.
Or Agriculture Minister, do you doubt his performance?
Of course, I
his
do.
background was never IT.
But then
Kidega, can I help a bit?
But then we can look at the things that are needed. The job description is there. We do not have to question that. They are saying this is what we need. And for you coming to prove that,
it doesn't matter.
because looking at Jennifer just did a hospital.
Can I chip in?
Management.
Thank you. I'd like to chip in briefly, and I'd like to approach it from this angle. Yes, people are differently skilled, differently. They have different abilities, and they actually achieve even in fields where they don't have degrees, but they are skilled in those particular areas. But there is a basic requirement to be something. You said that example you gave us of the mathematician who is a lawyer. He had to take up certain training, to be approved in that particular area. What we're really, if we go down, that low to discuss her academics and to question whether they are existing or not, she still must have a basic qualification, even if she's skilled, to do the job. And we know that it's important to have different abilities, and she could achieve even if she was a doctor and still make a good CEO. But does she have the basic education that we are looking for a CEO? You cannot just take anyone to be CEO. They must have a basic qualification. And that's what we are questioning for the current CEO of Uganda Airlines. It's not just who she is, who appointed her. Even if she skipped the process, which is the biggest evil right now. How did she get to that place? Yet it had been advertised and properly cited that this is what a CEO of Uganda Airlines should have. And if she doesn't have any of those, and she's just a good marketer, a good leader, it doesn't qualify her to be a CEO of Uganda Airlines, which should be making this country money.
Okay. Yes.
So Moses, a little context is very important. You see, the argument you're making might look nice, but it opens a floodgate for things we would not want to tolerate. Because the first thing we need to understand is what is the principal premise for the idea of description of jobs. The premise is that for you to do something like this, you must have studied this and then to this level of qualification. So then for us to determine who can do this, then we can say this will be their qualifications because they have studied this and they have studied that. That principle was laid down not in disregard of the fact that, like Beatrice said, people can be gifted and actually need to do some things without having to study them. But then on a comparative, how many people can actually do things without having to study for them, and how many people can actually do things because they have studied for them, and where do we draw the line? Three things. One, you cannot just assume that because people can be gifted and can do some things, we can then trust them to take them as and when we want them. Then second, you cannot disregard procedure because you think some person is actually qualified. Then third, when she had the chance to defend herself, what did she do? She's making statements like, have we fallen from sky? That lady had the chance to say, because she has been serving in the airline, she has been marketing, and it's not someone that we just brought from the street and then we put in the office of the CEO. No, it is from the same office. She has worked with the former CEO. She had an argument to make that, you see, I am able, regardless of my qualifications or whatever it is or what the procedure says, give me the chance to prove. Uganda would have said, okay, fine. She's not qualified as per the procedure, but she has asked for a probational position to prove herself. That argument would make sense. But that's not what she's asking. She's simply telling us, okay, my appointing, of course, in
You
court,
can do
my
nothing
appointing
about
authority
it.
is big, and what can you do about it? And you see, if I was that bad, we would have fallen from the sky. That is
Let me just say
Just
this.
conclusively,
That's
Lawel.
I am a graduate of industrial and organizational psychology.
Yes.
I have studied
And now
about human
turned lawyer.
resource and how we structure salaries across the organizational structure, the importance of recruitment and all those sorts of things. It's the basic argument, the importance of education. If you have studied ICT, you're better placed to deal with ICT. If you studied biology, you're able to know the anatomy of an insect or a human being. If you have studied civil aviation or specialized, your master's, perhaps your PhD, is in management, civil aviation, you are better positioned to have that. So the people who frame the job prescriptions know why they do. That they know that for you to manage...
But we have seen the biggest economic players.
Let me
graduates of
Kidega. That is
primary 7
no.
with no knowledge in accounting,
Maybe they have
nothing but they run powerful businesses.
Kidega, you cannot run a country or even your own life on outliers. The fact that somehow someone...
Right.
The few.
And that's why it gives you a comparative analysis. You get that if someone has studied education, they're better teachers. That one exception cannot be how we run a country.
Cannot be criteria for selection.
Let me just say this, that you look at people who run all airlines. For example, everyone is rushed to say that their airlines are making losses. All airline CEOs earn this much, but they don't look at the CVs of these individuals, how they are employed. Kidega, if you were a CEO of an airline, would you put your company in the hands of a Swasa graduate? If it was your airline.
Good question to the viewer, I think. Our time is fast spent. Colleagues, I'll give you only 30 seconds, only. And this I'll be very strict, to just give us your last words on the show. And then we can call it an afternoon. Shivan, Lawel, Lester, then I'll conclude with our guests. And no, let the gents start, then the ladies will conclude, since they are guests. Yes, Lester, beginning with you.
Okay, so it's the two things we have discussed are things that are very pertinent, because I mean the Kenyan politics is, Kenya occupies a very powerful position in the region, and we should be concerned what happens in Kenya, and also not just to pick lessons, but also to check what actually happens there, because like I said, it's very powerful, influences us. Then on public service and how it is said, I think I'll just conclude with the conclusion to the argument I was trying to make. Just because there are a few people that can be able to do the things that we would want people to study for, do them, does not mean that we can open the floodgate for anyone to just make a phone call, then they appoint someone in disregard of the procedure. I think principally speaking, it is important, we are safer when we respect the procedure, because it guarantees that we have the best of leaders than if we disregard the procedure. Otherwise, it's been nice talking to you this afternoon. I'm honored.
Thank you so much. I think that the common factor between the two the two discussions we've had is the desire to have the best people really take on the mantle. The idea that for Kenya you have the best, really, the lawyers, but also the political players, the professors, the best of the country should always, I think, offer themselves, because only then can these counties get the best trajectory. So I want to also call upon, Ugandans out there who are really good, especially, people in academia, people with experience, to not ignore the politics, to really engage so that we can shape a better country. Thank you.
Shivan.
Well, what we discussed today, if we are trying, I'm going to conclude more on the public service theme. If we are trying to fight employment, unemployment in Uganda, let us employ people with the right skills. People have done civil aviation and they're out there, they are not being employed in the civil aviation industry. But we have someone who has done SWASWA and is being employed. Let people with the right skills be where they are supposed to be, and people with the right qualifications also be where they're supposed to be. So literally, if we are trying to tackle the issue of unemployment in this country, let us also look at that. It's a very pertinent issue in human resource management. If you want people to work and if you want to have employment, employ people with the right skills such that you will know this one suits here and this one doesn't suit here. Thank you.
Yes, Beatrice.
Thank you. And in the spirit of regional integration and East Africanism, I'd just like to say that I am happy that we're discussing the idea of being able to pick the best practices from wherever they are happening and implementing them for ourselves to better our nations, our states. And for young people, I think for this conversation is really for us, because its impact, it's the results of what is happening everywhere around us is very fundamental in what happens in the next 10 to 15 years of our leadership, of our economies, and East Africa as a whole. And then coming down to the discussion in Uganda on public service, please let's not disregard merit, education, and the merit it gives, especially to employment. If you want to pick up anyone who is ably skilled, let them go to entrepreneurship and create jobs for themselves, and because they're ably skilled. But for as long as there are due processes and criteria for selecting leaders, especially with such capacities, they need to follow due process, and no high power should decide who that person is by skipping the process.
Wow, what an amazing way to end this show. Thank you very much, Comrade Shivan, Ndugu Lawel, Comrade Kamakude, and Comrade Lester. Many thanks for sparing the time to be on the Youth Roundtable. Of course, to the production team, it's always a pleasure and honor that you ensure that our viewers get this show right on time. Well, just to sum this up, I'll just use the words of the late Desmond Tutu, who said that in whatever you do, in wherever you are, just do right. Eventually, these so many pockets of right will overwhelm the world. I hope that in whatever you're doing, you are doing right, and you're doing what your conscience tells you is right. Otherwise, from us here on the Youth Roundtable, we wish you a lovely week, and we hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.